Okay, here's the prep. I have about 30 lengths of fiberglass reinforced strapping tape. I have 2 lengths of elastic with loops at either end. I've got masking tape within easy grasping distance. I have a rack holding my 2 pieces of binding because we're laminating, so that I can put glue on them and then leave them resting and have them not fall over. So we apply glue to the insides surfaces of each of the 2 layers. We nest them one inside the other. We start applying them to the channel, fixing them with the strapping tape, working our way, in this quadrant at least, working our way from the perfect centre of the tail through to the end. This one just goes past, it's too long, we'll trim it later. Once they are attached with the strapping tape, I then apply pressure with the elastic, looping over these dowels and their counterparts on the back. As I say, it's one of the terrifying parts of the build. I neglected to mention that after we've fixed them with the strapping tape, I put masking tape over the whole lot so that the elastic won't stick to any squeeze out that comes through. I also neglected to mention that I like to put a very, very minuscule bead of glue along the shelf part of that channel, because it's easy to apply glue to the face of the bindings, but not to the bit where they join to the sides rather than the top. Trying to make the tape apply pressure in both directions, both towards the back of the guitar and towards the centre of the soundboard. That's how it's looking. And now we get into the B&D part. I start at the waist, binding this as tight as I can, and it's a matter of just finding angles, because every time you loop it, it changes the angle. And I want to distribute the force and make sure that every part of the perimeter is being bound. It's utter chaos. That's what our victim looks like. As I say, it's pretty chaotic, and we just have to wait and then take the bandages off and see what's happened. The cutaway side, even on the flat top, is quite complex in that it is crucial that the positioning of the curve around the waist, and particularly the cutaway, be exactly where the bindings themselves curve. However, our need for accuracy to butt up to the existing end is also crucial. Now that the tape is off, I can inspect around the perimeter for gaps. Sadly, there is a small one here in the cutaway where the pressure that we applied was not quite enough to pull the bindings into that very, very tight curve. There's another small gap there, but the rest are all pretty microscopic. This will need to be filled either with sandpaper and glue or with wood filler, and this one too. When sanded smooth and underneath the finish, it's going to look very good, just not quite perfect, and I want to learn to do better. We need to repeat the operation now for the back. That brings a new complication because the back has got a curve. And simple geometry says that if we curve this like that, this part tilts in. So what I'm going to do is sand away about 1/4 millimeter on the lower edge of the waist, and we'll do the same thing for the cutaway section as well when we do the cutaway. That will allow the bindings to tilt inwards without creating a gap at the waist. Not sure if the camera will show this, but that's the fillet that we want to sand away, about 1/4 millimeter. I'm using the scraper to make sure that I don't crown that inside edge too much. I mean, it's going to crown a little bit, but not too much. I'm also checking that the combined thickness of the two layers of bindings is not less than the depth of the binding channel. For the final boss level quadrant, cutaway and back curvature, I've sanded away a little fillet from the inside of the waist and from the inside of the cutaway for reasons that we've discussed. So now to glue that up. It's getting more and more extreme, and to be frank, I'm a little worried that it's not as effective as it should be. I think I'm going to have to reevaluate the steps because either there's something wrong with me following them or there's something wrong with the steps themselves. And I think these bindings are just too inflexible. Nevertheless, we'll give this glue time to cure and see how they turned out. So what's the state of the patient? A bit disappointing, I'm afraid. There's gaps here, here, here and here, and a small one on the front. We'll be able to fill them, they won't look too bad. But the whole point of this set of videos is a repeatable process, a set of steps that if someone like me follows them diligently without forgetting them or getting them out of order, I'll get a consistent good result. and that's failing me. I am going to need to think of a new way of applying bindings, possibly 3 layers to make them thinner, but the problem is we're going to have to take a layer off around the outside, and if there are 3 layers we may run out of the outermost layer and sand down to the join. So it's a bit of a difficult issue. However, we shall plough on. I shall trim the bits of binding that stick out, and then we are going to be scraping and sanding them down level, first with the back and the soundboard, and then around the sides. The top is by no means finish ready, but it is level and all visible squeeze out glue marks have been removed. Now we do exactly the same thing on the bottom. I'm being really careful with this because grain direction can be treacherous, and there are 2 layers and they can have their grain slanted in different orientations. So, tiniest shavings, being very mindful of when it wants to dig down in. I was lucky, the grain direction on the 2 layers of bindings are aligned on this side of the guitar, so I can do a lot of the work with the spoke shave. On the other side I'm going to have to do more sanding and scraping. Believe it or not, that's the easy part. Now we have to do the sides. I now have the non-cutaway side from the neck block all the way to the access port, sanded, scraped, flush and smooth. It's a very labour-intensive process. I'll let you know my current steps, although as I've mentioned, I'd like to rethink this. I'm using the Shinto in pull mode to hog away the excess bindings down to about 1/3 of a millimetre. Like so. Then I use a flat block and some coarse sandpaper to essentially do the same thing again. When it's pretty close, I start sanding lengthwise across the grain of the bindings. When it's closer still, I start using my scraper to get it down to very, very close to flush. Finally, some fine sandpaper on a cork sanding block to finish the job. Inside the waist and the cutaway, I have to use a piece of PVC pipe. Sometimes I wrap it in a towel, put sandpaper over that to give it some cushioning so that more of the surface of the sandpaper bites.
If you don't have a Shinto, you don't have a shop.
Well, as you can see, we now have the bindings scraped and sanded flush all around the guitar, with the one exception of this edge here, which will join onto the heel. I want a smooth join there, so I've left it proud so that we can level it after attaching the neck. Another reason why I'd like to rework how I do the bindings is because my hands have a bit of arthritis, and this last few steps just is quite murder on them. Getting the right angle with the scraper, it's just very, very laborious. Anyway, that's enough for this session. Join us next time. Who knows what'll happen then? Cheers.